The Scarecrow is one of the most faithful comic book adaptations in Batman's entire rogues gallery across all media, and I suppose that's because he has a very simple gimmick. He loves scaring people. In his original 1941 comic debut, Professor Jonathan Crane was introduced as a gangly, awkward academic, widely mocked by his peers and the students for his spindly frame and tatty clothes. But strip away the fear toxins, the elaborate plots, and the theatrical masks, and Crane's fundamental motivation has never really changed. He's a weak, insecure man who gets his rocks off by terrifying other people. He is a psychological bully whose entire gimmick stems from a desire to dominate minds, use terror to make himself feel powerful in a world where he otherwise feels utterly pathetic. That basic pathology carried over into nearly every screen appearance. When he popped up as a recurring villain in Saturday morning cartoons like the Super Friends, he brought that same spiteful fear obsession to a broader audience. Decades later, Batman the Animated Series perfected this by leaning heavily into his vanity as a disgraced Gotham University professor. Driven mad by the loss of his academic prestige, BTAS's Crane used his fear gas to drag Batman and Robin through nightmarish visual hallucinations of their deepest fears. And of course, by the time of the new Batman adventures, Crane underwent a radical redesign, shedding his jack-o'-lantern and burlap bag masks for a ghastly hanging corpse aesthetic. Regardless of his appearance, Crane remained a self-made monster, a scientist obsessively pursuing his own twisted study of terror. And when Batman Caped Crusader released their first trailer, we got a glimpse at their Scarecrow. Rather than having tatty clothes and looking like he was made out of straw, their Scarecrow leaned heavily into the crow part of his name. He wears a bird-like gas mask that calls to mind the old Plague Doctor masks, and a smart all-black suit. So really a scary crow instead of a scarecrow, I guess. He only makes one appearance in Season 2, and no one actually calls him Scarecrow. While he is the villain of his story, the episode Sudden Fear is primarily about Harley Quinn's return. And it is appropriate that Scarecrow debuts in a story featuring Harley Quinn, given that she had teased his existence in the first season, saying that she had studied under Dr. Jonathan Crane at university. In fact, there was a second reference to the Good Doctor when Batman was scrolling through newspapers. We can see that he wrote a book called How to Stop Working and Influence People, although I gather that was a typo and it was supposed to say How to Stop Worrying and Influence People. The prospect of having this version of the Scarecrow being an out-of-control self-help guru really tickled my funny bone, but that isn't what we got at all. It was a misdirection. Dr. Jonathan Crane is not the Scarecrow. His son, Jonathan Crane Jr. is. And there was some clever misdirection in this episode. It sets up the creepy Professor Burton as the prime suspect, and we immediately distrust him because of how he leches over one of the young girls. Plus, he just looks really creepy. But the Scarecrow is Burton's teaching assistant and student, Jonathan Crane Jr. For most of the episode, people only refer to him as Junior instead of Jonathan or John, or even Johnny, which suggests that his father is well known enough by everybody that Junior's actual name isn't necessary. And that diminutive name, Junior, can carry weight. Being the son of a great man is hard enough, but it's even harder when you share your name with him. While he does have a personality of his own, we can infer that it is dwarfed by his father's reputation, and this, when coupled with his short stature, clearly makes him feel inadequate. While he isn't the most popular student, he's not a victim of bullying like his comic book counterpart. Sure, the jock Carmine teases him, but he's clearly his friend, even if he is a little patronizing. When he and Carmine step in to ask Professor Burton to leave their peer Jane alone, he misreads the situation and offers to get her some apple cider as a way of forming a connection with her. But she makes her excuses and walks away. While Carmine playfully mocks Junior, this clearly had an impact on him. He's tired of being patronized. He's tired of being ignored. He wants people to pay attention to him and respect him. It's a subtle shift that changes this entire pathology, moving him away from a classic revenge narrative and closer to the psychology of a mass shooter, and they use that imagery towards the episode's end after his identity is uncovered. Rather than targeting individuals that have annoyed him, he instead lashes out at anyone and everyone around him. Junior feels entitled to respect, attraction, and status, but he lacks the organic charm or physical presence to get it. When Jane walks away from this awkward attempt at comfort with the apple cider, she isn't being cruel or dismissive. She barely gives him a second thought. She's too busy feeling creeped out and wants to go back to the safety of her dorm room. But to Junior's fragile ego, casual dismissal feels like an existential insult. So he dons his suit and mask, heads to Jane's dorm room, and gasses her. She hallucinates a fire in her dorm room and jumps out of the window, falling to her death. To Junior, This is a big success. And that shows us the root issue troubling Junior, his inadequacy. Being dubbed Junior at every turn strips him of an independent adult identity. He isn't Jonathan Crane the scientist, he's just the diminished copy of a famous father who literally wrote the book on how to win friends and influence people. He feels utterly emasculated, caught between his father's overpowering shadow and his own physical and social shortfalls. And that's why his scheme is structured as a controlled experiment. Intellectualization is his ultimate defense mechanism. By reducing his peers to screaming, hallucinating test subjects, Junior flips the power dynamic. If he can't earn their affection or respect like his father could, he will use his toxin to force them onto their knees. Underneath that sleek, clinical plague doctor mask, Jonathan Crane Jr. is a fragile, bitter child, using panic to make the world acknowledge his presence. And it's funny that both Batman and Harley Quinn initially think that he's testing out a new drug on his potential clientele. When you're neck deep in crime 24/7, I guess that is a reasonable assumption to make. But really, he's just lashing out at people the only way he knows how. His fear gas had started out as a university project with Dr. Burton, but it was deemed to be unethical and the project was shut down. This was another crushing blow to Junior, furthering his feelings of inadequacy. The project was a key part of his identity, so when Burton pulled the plug, it gutted him. It was a total rejection of the one domain where he thought he had power. Having his identity effectively erased from the classroom left him with two choices: accept total obscurity or take his work into the wild. Without a legitimate outlet for his ambitions, the toxin went from a piece of academic research to a weapon. If the university wouldn't allow him to study fear on paper, then he'd force them to experience it in the flesh. And I know there will be some people that will point at the similarities between this version and the one seen in the show Gotham. But where Gotham treated Jonathan as a tragic victim, a boy whose brain was physically shattered by his father's forced experiments, Caped Crusader takes a far more insidious approach. Junior is a victim of irrelevance, not some mad experiment. While Gotham's Scarecrow puts on a mask to run away from his own trauma, Caped Crusader's Junior puts on the Plague Doctor suit to step out of his father's shadow and assert his dominance over people who dared to look past him. It transforms the Scarecrow from a gothic monster into a social predator. Batman and Harley Quinn figure out Scarecrow's identity after Junior kills Dr. Burton, leaving him as the only survivor from their group, so it was pretty obvious who the killer was. But Batman and Harley realize that now that he's been exposed, he has three options: running away, melting down, or both. As he lashes out at anyone and everyone, he decides the mask is no longer necessary, and when Batman arrives to stop him, Junior sprays him with the fear gas. This whole ending delightfully echoes the end of Batman the Animated Series' Nothing to Fear. There, the fear-toxin brings about visions of Batman's father telling him that he's a disgrace. He's only able to eventually stop the hallucinations by standing up to his fear by bellowing, "I am vengeance, I am the night, I am Batman!" Here, Batman's fear is that Gotham will always be in danger, always on the brink of annihilation, even by the time he's an old man. But instead of shying away from the problem, elderly Bruce gets out of bed and dives out of the window, facing the challenge head on. He may still be drugged, but he roars at Scarecrow that he feels no fear, that fear is a poison and a weapon, and he gives Junior a taste of his own medicine. When Batman asks him what he sees, Junior is frozen in terror. He sees Batman as a powerful, fearless monster, ready to devour him, and he collapses. It's a wonderful callback to Batman the Animated Series and shows that no matter how much things change, the core dynamic will remain the same. Once Batman conquers his own mind, the hunter instantly becomes the hunted, turning the toxin back on Scarecrow to show him who the real monster in the dark actually is. And it's not clear if Scarecrow died because of his exposure to the toxin, but note the calm expression on his face. When his victims died, their faces were contorted in terror. Whether he survived or not, there's an irony to Junior's story. He wanted nothing more than for the world to stop ignoring him and finally see him. But in the end, when he looked into the eyes of the Dark Knight, the only person left cowering in the dark was Jonathan Crane Jr. himself. But what did you think? Junior's grounded mass shooter vibe feels unpleasantly real compared to the classic comic villains. Does this approach make Caped Crusader's Scarecrow scarier than BTAS's Mad Professor? Or do you prefer the traditional self-made scientist? Let me know what you think in the comments below. As ever, special thanks to my channel members who helped to make this video possible. If you want to see your name on screen and get early access to all of my upcoming videos, then join the channel now. Thanks for watching everybody, see you next time.